Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
I'm Sean Haney, and this is Realag on the Weekend. Let's get real and get connected with the week that was in Canadian agriculture. Realag on the Weekend starts now. Welcome, everybody, to Realag on the Weekend. Of course, we're on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. I'm your host, Sean Haney of RealAgriculture.com. It is great to be with you. And great week. You know why? We got some moisture in parts of Western Canada. And the best part is that moisture came in areas that really needed it. And it's just awesome. It just lifts the spirits. You know, I was talking to Ann Wasco, the Gateway Livestock Exchange, yesterday on the Realag Radio podcast. We were doing a beef market update, and I encourage you to check that out wherever you get your podcasts. And, you know, Ann said, the great rain, it's heating up. You can hear the grass growing. And in parts of southwestern Saskatchewan, that's something we haven't been able to say for a number of years. So this is fantastic news. It really does lift the spirits. So it is great to see. Today on Realag on the Weekend, we're going to talk about a big win that Canada had last week. Health Canada announcing that we're going to have gene editing in the country. The final approval of 3. This one was on feed, and we're going to be able to have gene editing. And what does that actually mean for us? We've also got the newest results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. We'll talk about that. How are you feeling about your current and future farm financial performance, among a bunch of other stuff? Rob Meyer from Genesis Fertilizer is going to be here for a product spotlight. And then we're also going to hear from Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research to talk about what's exactly going on with pulse tariffs and India. If you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Of course, you can also find us across all the different social media platforms as Real Agriculture. Or why not call the Realag feedback line? The number is 855-776-6147. You know, earlier this week on the Realag Radio podcast, I talked to Krista Thomas. She is with the Canada Grains Council. We were talking about this approval on gene editing in the country, and quite frankly, the industry is really celebrating. A lot of hoopla connected to this one. What is kind of frustrating is that Canada was one of the first countries that was talking about the potential for gene editing. And of course, in typical Canada fashion for some reason, one of the last to make the approval. So we're behind. The country's playing catch up. That's concerning. One has to ask ourselves, why did it take so long for this approval to happen in Canada? But that's a whole regulatory body question, maybe for another day. I want to talk here about just how exciting this approval on gene editing is in my mind. And as we're looking for things like improved yield, as we're looking for things like improved efficiency when it comes to like things like nitrogen, maybe being able to weather a drought, maybe being able to weather very wet conditions, maybe diseases, as an example, Aphanomyces in pulses, Fusarium in wheat. None of these are guaranteed. But gene editing is now another tool in the toolbox for plant breeders to potentially bring improvements and solutions to the farmer. And that's not just in Saskatchewan. That's really across all provinces and across all crops and really around the world. So this is exciting. And there's a couple different things I think that at least lend themselves to this gene editing discussion that are important to note. We found out from a Real Agri-Studies study going back a year ago, and this has come up a lot when we're talking about some of the mergers and acquisitions that are happening in our industry. 90% of farmers across Canada are concerned about consolidation. Now, one of the places we have seen a lot of consolidation is in the seed the seed sector, right? We remember the Bayer purchase of Monsanto, right? We saw Corteva formed out of DuPont and Dow. So we have seen a lot of consolidation in the sector, and who's saying we won't see more going forward? One of the barriers to entry for newcomers into the space when it comes to plant breeding is the cost. 10 years to market with a new variety. Some will say 8, but a lot of times it's 10. It's also the cost of implementing GM traits into a crop. This is not a poor man's business, so to speak. There's a lot of big time investment, upfront costs that a company has to try to get a return on. So here's what gene editing provides: an avenue, at least a potential laneway to maybe increase competition in the plant breeding sector because of the lower cost of entry. That is a competitive factor. So we may see actually increased competition in this sector from an approval like this. The other thing and this really, really shows a benefit when we're talking about Saskatchewan. Okay, think about pulse crops and the importance that pulse crops bring to the economic, the GDP of this province. And we're going to talk to Chuck Panner. We're going to hear from him a little bit later in the show, talking about exports of pulses and some of the tariff situation and how that does impact the exports out of the country. A lot of times, investment gets put into the major crops. And it always leads with corn. We got 90 million acres. That's where the money's made. And of course, then it maybe drifts into soybeans. And then we see companies maybe focusing on wheat potentially. Canola sitting out there like 22 million acres in Western Canada. It's kind of a fringe crop globally. Well, what about pulses at 3 and change or 4 and change? Considerably lower. And so when we're dealing with a problem like, say, Phenomyces that is really challenging and it is a threat to the future of the pulse acre in Western Canada, the trouble is it doesn't get the money that it needs. It's a pretty small crop. This is an issue also in the Northern Plains of the U.S. It's the same challenge, same realities. Because of the lower cost of entry with something like gene editing, this allows us to attack a problem like a Phenomyces with a bit of a different twist and potentially finding solutions quicker and at a lower cost. And boy, would that be a benefit to the farmer. Boy, that would just be a real benefit to the farmer. So, you know what? All of this is, at this point, the promises are empty. We have to see the results. None of it has happened yet, but this is a really integral first step to Canada being committed to innovation going forward. And anything that anything that potentially increases competition, brings new products to market. Also, the products are not GM. They're non-GM. So that's even a more benefit from a consumer acceptance standpoint, for sure. So if you missed the discussion that I had with Krista Thomas, it is posted at realagriculture.com. It is also on the Wednesday edition of the Realag Radio podcast that you can get wherever you get your podcast. So encourage you to definitely check that out. Do you feel as positive about this approval as I do? What are some things that maybe I'm missing that you're like, well, wait a minute, Sean, pump the brakes here, hype man. Here's how I see it. Send me your thoughts. I do want to hear from you and see how you feel about it. I know everybody's not as excited as maybe I am or being as optimistic, but I think I want your feedback on it and kind of get an idea where the audience here stands here on Realag on the weekend. So appreciate any of that feedback that you can provide. Okay, when we come back here on Realag on the weekend, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the results of the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. Are you more positive about your financials and the industry than you were back in January? I have the data to tell you about when we come back. You're listening to Realag on the weekend, and of course, we are across Saskatchewan on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME.
If you're involved in the agriculture industry, it's important to stay informed on all the latest issues affecting your business. At RealAgriculture.com, we offer fast, reliable news, information, and insights to help you keep on top of all of the latest in Canadian agriculture. Visit RealAgriculture.com and sign up for our free daily newsletter covering everything from news, agronomy, animal agriculture, and much more. Visit RealAgriculture.com/subscribe today.
There's a reason we call it the Corn School. Videos on everything from planter setup to weed control, field trial results, and the latest yield strategies. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast in your favorite podcast app. Check out the latest Corn School episode today.
Want to use the PGR in your cereals but no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging risk, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
Now, you probably saw it yesterday on the news, but super encouraging information yesterday at a Stats Can. Strong job numbers in Canada. Canada's economy added 5 times the number of jobs that were forecast for April. And of course, the unemployment rate unexpectedly held at 6.1%, but wages are growing at the slowest pace in 10 months. The economy added 90,400 jobs in the month. And we have the unemployment rate at 6.2%. We've got wage growth slowing. Jobs are strong, though. What I'm reading and hearing is that this does give a path. Now, we do have some inflation data coming out between now and the early June Bank of Canada meeting. But the smart money is still banking on a rate cut in Canada here in June. Interestingly, it seems in the U.S., like, not to say it's the majority of opinion, but growing opinion that the Federal Reserve may actually increase one more time yet. Boy, is that a turnaround from where we thought we'd be back in December of 23. People were forecasting for 24 that we could have upwards of like 4 to 6 rate cuts in the U.S. And now we're talking about a rate increase. That's going to create maybe some discrepancy and some shift in the Canadian dollar for sure. But I believe the Canadian dollar was up on Friday to 73 and change based on the job number. So strong job number. Analysts were expecting 18,000 jobs, and we did 90,000 plus. So pretty fascinating indeed. Let's get to the Canadian Farmer Sentiment Index. And, of course, Real Agri Studies every quarter does a new intake of this. And big shout out to everybody that has participated on our Real Agri Studies Insights panel. We very much appreciate it. This is important work to better understand how the farmer truly feels at this point in time. So we look at behaviors and attitudes and sentiment and really get a better handle on where are we at, instead of a bunch of people making assumptions. Here's how farmers feel about this. No, we actually know this because you're telling us in these quarterly surveys. So we very, very much appreciate you participating. If you want to find out more information about Real Agri Studies, go to realagristudies.com. Okay, let's look at the results. So the first question we ask has to do with current farm financial performance. And this is basically asking, okay, and this is across Canada, okay? This is across Canada. We're asking, is my current farm financial performance better today or worse off today than 12 months ago? And we're relatively flat to January. This is the end of April number. We're down, and it's a scale of 0 to 200. 100 is neutral. We're at 85. So we've come off the highs going back to January of 24, which was 119. Now we're sitting at about 85. We kind of bottomed out here. We've flattened out. We've been in this vicinity between 85 and 90 going back to October of 23. We also ask about future farm financial performance. And over the history of us doing this survey, which goes back to September of 2022, current farm financial performance has always been higher than future farm financial performance. And future farm financial performance is, will my farm be better off 12 months from now than it is today? Okay? People have always felt better about the current than the future. Well, for the first time, and it's basically by 2, but future farm financial performance is higher than current farm financial performance. So people feeling better about the future than they do about the current, although they're virtually the same number. At one time, the gap was a good 30 points going back to January of 23. Or sorry, January of 24, I should say. Now, let's look at optimism towards the future Canadian ag economy. So in the next 12 months, will we have widespread good or widespread bad times in Canadian agriculture? In January, this was a 44. It's now a 64. So we've came up 20 points, but we're still fairly much in the negative in terms of how farmers feel about the next 12 months overall as an industry. The all-time high is going back to January of 24. That number was 97. Okay? 97. Or sorry, January. It should be January of 23. That's 97. When we ask about the next 5 years, in January people said 56. Now they're saying 81. So we've kind of popped up there. I'm really curious as to why people are feeling better about the next 5 years than they were back in January. But hey, I also, my perception has been that January was way too negative. We don't need to be that negative. The other part, I've got to be optimistic about this industry. People were pretty down in the January intake, I would say, overall. The other thing I want to point out is the marketing aspects, okay? So when we look at outlook on selling crops, this is basically trying to get a gauge on, is it a good time to sell your crops or is it a good time to hold your crops? Essentially, are you long or are you short? Okay, and what we saw, we continue to see in terms of outlook on selling crops, it is like a roller coaster. It is all over the place. If you're into statistics, the high standard deviation on this one across, going all the way back to September of 22. We saw 117 in April. That's up from 99 in January. If we go back to July of 23, we're an all-time high of 138. So you can see that we have flopped all over the place. At one time, March of 23, we were down to 70. Okay, so this has really moved all over. The other question we ask about is confidence in marketing crops. And the thing here is that we are bounced up a little bit there. We're up to 85. The all-time high is 104. That's all the way back to September of 22. But in January, we were 75. So we bounced up 10 points in the month of April compared to January. If we look at some of the reasons why, and you know what, this rain this week, if we surveyed this week, I think we'd even see more of an optimistic pop here for sure. But this was done in the last week of April. If we look at the people that feel negative towards their current and future farm financial performance, there's definitely some trends in terms of the why of that. One is commodity prices. Two is input prices. When we talk about future farm financial performance, one of the reasons that people are concerned is increased cost of borrowing. Okay, so that's more of a factor in the future than it is currently. Now, that probably has a lot to do with renewing mortgages. So if you don't have a floating mortgage, if you have a fixed mortgage, maybe your mortgage is going to be coming due here soon, that's going to be a factor. There was a story out by the Bank of Canada this week in the Globe and Mail talking about how mortgage costs for Canadian consumers on houses those payments could be up as much as 60% if you're renewing your mortgage right now. That's a big number. Indeed, it would be the same for a farm mortgage as well. It'd be interesting, though, if we do see the Bank of Canada, which I referred to at the beginning of the segment, if we do see the Bank of Canada lower rates and begin that process of lowering rates, that's going to ease some of that pressure on that future farm financial performance because that's the cost of borrowing. And so we could actually be seeing an opportunity here in the back half of 2024, provided the weather cooperates, provided interest rates go lower. Maybe we see these commodity markets, like they have been trying to, bounce off the lows. There's a good year potentially, maybe a better year than we thought in front of us. Now, some of this in Western Canada, though, is going to make up for like 2021. That's when the markets shot higher and there was drought across Western Canada. And people didn't get to capitalize. So I don't want to sound like way over optimistic, but I think if we look and compare today versus January, things are looking a little bit better in farm country than they did. So, and also I should say, hey, for livestock producers, when it comes to outlook on selling their livestock margins, 173 out of 200. Livestock farmers feeling very good about their margins here in 2024 at this point as of the end of April. So if you have any questions about any of this, let me know. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Listen, when we come back, we're going to do a product spotlight with Genesis Fertilizer. Find out what they're up to and how they're making progress on this new facility. You're listening to Realag on the Weekend, and of course, you're listening to us across Saskatchewan on 650 CKOM and 980 CJME. Get all the information you need to keep your pulse crop healthy and profitable with the Pulse School on RealAgriculture.com. The Pulse School is a free YouTube video series covering agronomy, research, and more across a host of different pulse crops. It's also available as an audio podcast wherever you download or stream your favorite podcast. Check us out on YouTube or visit realagriculture.com. The Pulse School, brought to you by BSF Canada.
The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com is your one-stop shop for everything a canola grower needs. Check out our free video series on YouTube for all the latest in canola agronomy, research, marketing, and more. Don't have time to watch? Download the podcast version of the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com or anywhere you download your podcasts. Stay on top of all things canola with the Canola School on RealAgriculture.com, brought to you by BASF and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
The following is a paid product spotlight with Genesis Fertilizer.
I am Lindsay Smith, and it is time for today's product spotlight. Joining me now is Rob Meyer. He's the Vice President of Strategic Alliances for Genesis Fertilizers. Welcome here, Rob.
Well, thanks, Lindsay. Appreciate it. Hope all is well with you as well.
Okay, so Rob, this is new. This is exciting. You've recently joined Genesis Fertilizers as the VP of Strategic Alliances. Tell us about what brought you to Genesis and how excited you are about building a new nitrogen plant in Western Canada.
Yeah, this is a great moment. And I don't want to put it all on me. What's transpiring here and the development of what's happening with Genesis it's phenomenal. When I look at my career, Lindsay, I've been pretty fortunate, working for probably two of the larger agribusiness companies on the planet. But one thing we know, most of us know is that for any of these organizations to be successful, the most important ingredient, who they rely upon, it's the grower, it's the producer. And while I've looked at my career and the development over the last couple of years, I've worked in the beef industry and the grains and oil seeds, and I can go on and on. What's happening here with Genesis not only excites me, it attracts me, and I feel pretty confident in where the business is at today. There's a lot of hard work to be done going forward, but what a time to jump on board. This to me is a legacy moment, and I'm really honored to be a part of this.
Now, this is a significant project, as you've alluded to. This perhaps the biggest ever to build for nitrogen of this scope. I know this is a new role for you, but as you mentioned, with your ag business background, what is it about Genesis that has grabbed your attention? What really has been the attention grabber since you got going with Genesis?
Yeah, it's a good question. We'll obviously get into a little bit of the finer details and the mechanics and the update, but really when you make a move like this in your career, it doesn't matter what organization you're working for or what space you're in, but there's certain things you're looking for, and that's around integrity, around culture, work ethic. So I think right from the beginning, as I started talking to the group, what really impressed me and certainly has me confident in part of this legacy moment. This for me is going to be, something about, the history of Canadian agriculture. When we look back, I feel that strongly about it. Many agribusinesses are out there, and Genesis for me is one of the very few, if not the only, that I can think of that's being built for producers by producers. The team of experts that they've assembled The key is the passion. This is a local business that's being built. Producers are a part of the team. They're on the bus. They're a part of this organization. And honestly, this is a dream come true. When you look at any organization out there, you're looking at the expertise of the organization, the people they brought in, their work ethic, their values. And I think they've assembled the right experts from, look at it, farm-centric district managers to engineers, operations, and management. But also what I wanted to be mindful of and explore before I committed was, just how true they were to managing costs and expenses. It's really easy to not take care of that side of it. And, this team isn't about flash. They're all about hard work. They're about integrity and getting this Farmer First company built and up and running.
Now, as we can't have this conversation without, of course, an update on where the Genesis plant is at as far as plans and why farmers should be considering becoming part of exactly that team you just mentioned.
Yeah, now we get to talk about the fun stuff. Where are we at today? The early engineering, the design phase, it sounds interesting, but it's real. It's just wrapping up. And an announcement, many probably know this, was recently made to expand the production capacity of the nitrogen plant in Belle Plaine. This is a key driver, 700,000 metric tons per annum to now 1.128 million metric tons per annum. This is a huge step forward. A plant with the capabilities to provide not just urea, but also urea ammonia sulfate, the UAS, as well as the DEF, that's the diesel exhaust fluid component, with future plans now in play to install the equipment and also produce UAN. So if you really think about it, that package, these upgrades are not only going to make the plant more flexible, I think that's a key ingredient, but more profitable for the farmer owners. This is the level of strategic expertise that, really Genesis has to work alongside growers. Again, I come back to this. We are working alongside growers, with growers. We are a team, and it's truly incredible what's happening today. To add on to that, importantly, we've got agreements in place with the likes of Tyson Croup through their Uday division, and this is all about the engineering side. So if you look at it, to begin the pre-feed, and once that concludes, we believe in the next few months, the full feed's going to be beginning. And this is where it gets really exciting because you've got specialized team of engineers, construction experts, will then fully design and cost out the plant. And, this is where the rubber's starting to hit the road. So, we're entering the spring. Farmers are thinking about their businesses, their crop plans, their fuel, their fertilizer. And here we are, and we're right in the mix of it right now with, incredible experts. And we're pushing this project, and it's a great time to be on board.
All right. And Rob, for those interested, where can they go for more information?
Yeah, really, I would just encourage everyone. It's busy times, right? Everybody's focused on their business. They got their plans, and they're mapping out their costs, and they're keeping updated on the market. I just ask everybody out there, take a moment, do some due diligence, spare 2 hours in your week from Sunday to Sunday. It doesn't matter when it would be. Reach out to us. We'll come out, give a 2-hour slot. It'll be worth every minute to understand, get updated, ask very open, transparent questions, challenge us, get the feedback, and make the right decision. In order to do this, visit us at genesisfertilizers.com. Pick up the phone, send us an email.
All right, Rob, thanks so much for joining me here on the show.
Yeah, great. I look forward to talking to you again. All the best.
We'll be back with more of Realag on the weekend. We talked to Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research about pulse tariffs. You're listening to 650 CKOM and 980 CGME across Saskatchewan.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
This week on the Real Ag Radio podcast, Lindsay Smith of Real Agriculture had a chance to talk to Chuck Penner of Left Field Commodity Research to get an update on what exactly is going on with India and tariffs on Canadian pulse exports. Here's that conversation.
Well, the news was this was kind of, it wasn't a huge surprise, at least to us. We were kind of watching this, tracking this and that sort of thing. But what they did this last weekend was they announced, or earlier in, I guess it was December, they announced that they would take their 50% import tariffs on yellow peas specifically, and they would drop it to zero. And they extended that, I think, to the end of February. And then they extended it again, and then they extended it again. And so now it's been extended again to the end of October. So that's a more meaningful shift, in my opinion. At the same time as they did that, they have a 60% import tariff on Desi chickpeas, which we don't really grow, but they compete with yellow peas in that market. And that was dropped to zero to the end of March. So for all of these other crops, for a bunch of different pulse crops, they have zero tariffs and they run to the end of March, which is the end of their marketing year. But for peas, they just keep kicking this down the road a little bit at a time, just teasing us, right? Just, a little bit at a time. But this October thing is more important because now it rolls into the new crop for us, so the 24 crop. So we'll be able to ship peas against that.
Now, as you said, I mean, this has been, little bits at a time. And so keeping tabs on this, what is driving, do you think, this larger commitment to kicking it quite out in front all the way to October?
Right. Well, they finished their Rabi harvest at the kind of March, April-ish timeframe is when they do that, most of that. And so some of their crops, their lentil crop was okay and that kind of stuff, but their Desi chickpea crop and the pea crop, from what we understand, was also smaller. And so really what we've been tracking prices for peas and Desi chickpeas in India to see if the government would respond. And really what they're trying to do is they're trying to keep food prices under control. So that's the big thing. There's elections going on there right now, all of that kind of stuff. So they're trying to keep food prices under control to keep the voting public happy. So that's the underlying thing that's driving that. So now it's been good news, or it is good news for Canadian farmers.
Mm-hmm. I listened to a podcast about India's elections. They take 6 weeks, not of a campaign, the actual voting takes 6 weeks.
Yeah, they do it state by state. So,
yeah.
If you think, knowing what's happening on the East Coast here and the West Coast, whatever, they've got that.
They have 6 weeks of elections, which is just wild.
Yeah.
So yes, as you mentioned, though, that does create, because there's an election happening, there is this added incentive, of course, to keep the public happy and make sure that, they can afford the food that they want and need. We are here first week of May. There is crop in the ground in many areas and will continue to be for going in for the next couple of weeks. Does this advent of pushing this on the pea side through to October, does this potentially switch some acres, or is this really just good news for everybody who already had their pea acres committed?
I think it's going to be not cause a huge change in acreage. There might be a little bit here and there, but not really. I think it's more important that the prices are moving higher a little bit. But the difficulty with the Indian market is that Russian peas also have access to that market, and Russia is growing the initial estimates were sky high, and now they've kind of scaled them back because they have some cropping issues there, some heat and some frost and some things like that. So they have a little bit of that kind of thing going on, but so that's going to kind of cap the market. If we had India buying big volumes of just Canadian peas, yeah, they would clean us out in a hurry, and so on. And then you also have to have China buying at the same time to really get that rally going. So we've seen a little bit of strength on new crop bids, and actually this week I was looking at bids just earlier today and looking at old crop bids, which really haven't moved much. Because I think there's just not many peas left to buy, old crop peas left to buy. So a little bit of strength on new crop. But I don't know, without a serious problem, we're not going to see a runaway rally. But it's still good news, better news than the opposite, that's for sure.
Now, is the Russian competition sort of new on the pea front, or have we always been in the same market as them?
Well, they've come into the Chinese market in the last 10 months or so. They came to an agreement on a phytosanitary barrier, and now Russian peas at times, China's importing more peas from Russia than they are from Canada. So some months that happens. So yeah, they're a serious player there. They haven't really been exporting a lot to India, but their crops last year was a record crop of about 4.7 million tons. This year could be somewhere in that same ballpark. So they have more peas to export now just in the last couple of years.
Mm-hmm. Now, we've mentioned, of course, China and India and how these things sort of switch. When Canadian peas were priced out of the Indian market, we saw China come on board and sort of saved our bacon, if you will, our plant-based bacon. Now we see, so is India removing this tariff? Does that, like, where is China in all this? Has China still been buying, or has China dropped out of this picture?
Well, China had bought, a whole lot from Russian peas. So they're sitting on some pretty big inventories. So their Chinese imports have really gotten quiet the last 2-3 months or so. I don't know that that's a sign of an ongoing problem, or whether it's just kind of a seasonal thing or a cyclical thing or something like that. So yeah, it's a little bit of a concern. I think China will still buy for fall delivery and that sort of thing, but right now they don't have that urgency. And again, they can play Russia off against Canada. So
right.
There's a little bit of that going on. So yeah, again, you need both China and India buying at a really strong clip to really send this thing strongly higher. But yeah, if India hadn't come into the market now, we would be heading in the opposite direction, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. Where do lentils land in all of this? Are they a player in either of these markets?
Well, not the Chinese market, the lentil market. Yeah, India is still the largest buyer. They had a decent crop. Their Rabi harvest was decent, but now we're competing much more. Australia is a much stronger competitor than they have been. So the last 2 to 3 years, they've been quite a strong competitor. And so that, again, keeps a lid on that type of a market. So it's not related to, those tariffs are at zero and have been for quite a long time. But we just got the stocks report today, and there's very low supplies of lentils and of peas in Western Canada. I don't quite think they're as low as StatsCan says, but regardless, pretty tight supplies. So right now we're in a bit of a friendly situation. And my thing is, what I'm wondering now is, we're getting more of this rain in the southern prairies. Might that actually discourage some lentil acres because of concerns about disease, root rot, and that sort of thing? So that's a possibility too.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yes. Seeing reports of several pockets of moisture happening in areas that desperately need it. But you're right, some of these crops don't like wet feet, and so
as soon as you talk about the rain, it's funny. They say, "Well, the crop isn't made yet." I'm not saying that. I'm just saying for the next few weeks, it's looking good. Better than it was the last year or 2 years or 3 years. So anyway, whatever. That's the way that discussion goes.
We know in Saskatchewan, you never say that there's ever too much rain, because whenever it rains, you just want it to keep raining, even if it ends up wet. You never say.
Well, or there's the really old joke: what's the difference between a flood and a drought? Well, about 1/4 of an inch. Yeah.
That sounds about right, actually. Especially in some of those areas. So, yes. Okay. Well, we'll continue watching this, Chuck. Thanks so much for bringing us up to date on what's happening there. Let us know if anything changes major. And who knows, maybe we'll have a a huge demand come out of China and India at the same time and just drive
That would be
prices crazy.
fantastic.
Wouldn't
Yep.
that be great? Okay. All right. Chuck Penner with Left Field Commodity Research. Thank you.
Do encourage you over the weekend here to check out realagriculture.com, because we can only fit so much into the Real Ag Radio podcast, can fit only so much into Real Ag on the weekend. It's got to live somewhere, and it lives at realagriculture.com, all of the stuff that we do in a week, and a lot happened this week, so I encourage you to check that out. Also sign up for our e-newsletters, realagriculture.com/subscribe. Send me your feedback, shaney@realagriculture.com. Thanks so much for listening to Real Ag on the Weekend. I'm Sean Haney of realagriculture.com.